From childhood, I've been an upfront and dedicated individual, instilled with hard work and loyalty by my parents. My father diligently crafted his accounting business, while my mother dedicated herself as a teacher. Their unwavering commitment set an exemplary standard for me. Upon meeting Jillian at a friendly gathering, we forged an instant connection despite her recent heartbreak. Our conversations flowed effortlessly, and over time our friendship blossomed into love. 2 years later, we exchanged vows, and I believed our life together was complete. However, certain days presented challenges like the morning's chaos when we rushed out the door, leaving everything in disarray. Unfortunately, today's morning woes were just a precursor to a series of events that would change everything. Jillian and I have shared nearly 5 years together. We met at a gathering hosted by mutual friends while she was navigating a difficult breakup. Our friends believed my presence could offer her solace, and despite initial hesitation, we developed a genuine friendship. 6 months later, I asked her out, and 2 years after meeting, I proposed to her. Her enthusiastic acceptance had me convinced that our bond was unbreakable until this fateful evening. "Jillian," I asked as I polished my shoes, "should I don the black or beige heels for the evening?" "You look stunning in both," I replied, "but the black ones accentuate your calves more." Jillian had always been passionate about fashion but often sought my advice. After a demanding day at work, I was weary and frustrated, yet Jillian's excitement about her high school reunion seemed to trump my exhaustion. Normally, she would offer words of comfort, but this week her focus was entirely on the event. Despite feeling neglected, I attempted to mask my disappointment with enthusiasm. Upon arriving at the reunion, Jillian was immediately enveloped by a group of friends, leaving me alone at the dinner table. I sat with our companions, Lena and Mark, but my thoughts were elsewhere. Jillian appeared jovial but hardly acknowledged me, and I detected odd stares from the attendees. As dinner concluded, Jillian and Lena disappeared for an extended period while the group prepared to proceed to a nearby club. "What's transpired, Mark?" I inquired of my friend, as Jillian and Lena remained absent. Mark seemed hesitant. "I'm not precisely sure what you mean, Greg." "Mark, don't play coy," I retorted. "Where is Jillian?" I asked, concern gnawing at me. Lena hesitated before glancing at Mark and then around the venue, searching for words. "Greg, she's with the band," she finally admitted. "They're heading to the club without informing you." "My wife?" I exclaimed, anger surging through me. "What are you not telling me?" They avoided my gaze, and frustration compelled me to rush towards the club. Arriving within minutes, I witnessed Jillian dancing intimately with another man. My heart sank as those in attendance watched with a mix of pity and judgment. Lena's touch on my shoulder startled me. "That's Jillian's former flame, Troy," she explained. "They shared a childhood romance and dated throughout high school. He received a scholarship and they parted ways. I observed their dance, a sense of betrayal washing over me." Lena continued. "He recently transferred back to town for work. They don't seem too different. Their hearts have always been intertwined," I muttered. "Their intention was to reunite, Greg," Lena added, her voice heavy with emotion. As the song drew to a close, Troy embraced Jillian. My anger erupted, and I clenched my fists so tightly that blood seeped out. Jillian noticed my presence and approached, leaving Troy behind. "Troy was my first love, Greg," she said without hesitation. "We vowed to reconnect when he returned." "So you did," I replied sarcastically. "Don't be bitter," Jillian chided. "Troy and I share an unbreakable bond." "We are married, Jillian," I retorted. "I apologize, Greg, but we must divorce," she declared. "Troy and I have a deeper connection." People stared, and a security guard approached. "Greg, you've never been," she began before trailing off. "I adore you, but our love pales in comparison to mine for Troy," she stated. Troy approached us, placing his arm around Jillian. "You must be Greg," he said with feigned concern. "Gregory," I corrected him. "I understand your distress," he replied, "but you'll come to realize that this is for the best. Jillian says you've been an exceptional husband. It would be prudent if we maintained cordial relations for the sake of our shared acquaintances." "Not for long," I uttered, glaring at Jillian before turning to Troy. "Let me elucidate the situation," I began, suppressing my rage. "You two carried on a love affair before Troy's relocation. Jillian and I met, fell in love, and married. Upon Troy's return, you rekindled your romance behind my back. Clearly, everyone was aware of the situation except me, and now I'm the subject of humiliation." "Greg, this wasn't the plan," Jillian interjected. Wasn't supposed to be what? I demanded. You've ignored me all week, dragged me to this event, then abandoned me without a word. You left without informing me so that I would inevitably stumble upon this spectacle. Troy attempted to intervene, but I silenced him. You're both unfaithful. You've been seeing each other for months behind my back. Greg, please calm down, Troy urged. Jillian and I are destined to be together. We regret the pain we've caused, but she loves me, and we intend to marry. You and she should file for divorce. Of course, I replied coldly. Gregory, Jillian uttered. I'm truly sorry. This is the only path forward. It will be painful, but it's for the best. She paused, trying to gauge my mood. It's Gregory, not Greg, I corrected. She gulped. Gregory, she said, I understand you're hurting, but we're still young. You'll find someone else. My eye twitched, making her grow even paler. Gregory, I think it's best if you leave, Troy interjected. Everyone here knows that Jillian and I belong together, and you're just the third wheel. I smiled, and half the room turned to stare at me questioningly. On that, we agree, he said, thinking I had finally understood. Now that everything's out in the open, Jillian and I will stay away from your house this weekend and next week so you can move out. Move out? I asked, tilting my head. Well, it's Jillian's house, Troy clarified. I see, I replied, my eyes narrowing. Gregory, my soon-to-be ex-wife said, we thought it would be easier for you. The house is perfect for Troy and me to have kids. It's too big for you. I see, I repeated, the last syllable a hiss. The silence stretched on until the DJ resumed the music. No one started dancing. Everyone watched to see what would happen. Troy spoke loudly. I'm sorry, Gregory, but this is the situation. I know it's difficult, but don't take offense. He held out his hand. I stared at it, then at him. He quickly withdrew it, deciding it was time to leave. I turned and walked out. No one stopped me. The bouncers opened the doors and the noise from inside died down. Are you okay? One of the bouncers asked. No, not really, I replied. The other bouncer said, if you wanted to go back and give that a-hole a couple punches, we could wait a few minutes before pulling you out. For the first time all day, I laughed. The bouncers smirked. Tempting as that sounds, I don't need a night in the gatehouse, I said. Both nodded. I've seen some nasty breakups, but this is one of the coldest, the first bouncer said. I'm sorry, I waved off the sympathy. Don't worry about it. I'll just go home and change the locks. The second bouncer added, I figured. I raised an eyebrow and smiled. We talked a bit more before I shook their hands and left. On the way home, I stopped at a hardware store. It was late, but I quickly bought new locks, deadbolts, moving boxes, and packing tape. Once home, I changed the locks and started packing Jillian's things. A few hours later, exhausted and feeling utterly abandoned, I sat down with a Kraken and soda. I opened my laptop, canceled our joint credit cards, opened a new account, and transferred half of our joint savings. I found our legal folder with house deeds, investment properties, and our prenuptial agreement. While it didn't cover infidelity, it protected my business assets. I slept fitfully but managed a few hours. In the morning, I found a cafe and enjoyed a fusion breakfast. While there, I drafted a letter to a lawyer friend explaining the situation. He called, shocked, but assured me he'd file the divorce papers on Monday and refer me to someone who could help. When I got home, Mark and Lena were waiting in the driveway. I parked around the corner, and Lena started, Greg? I raised my hand, stopping her. It's Gregory. Excuse me, Gregory, Lena asked. My name is Gregory. Only friends can call me Greg. Listen, buddy, Mark began, trying to be conciliatory. We're sorry about last night. It's not like... I raised my hand again, silencing him. I looked at a tree across the road, one of its limbs torn off by a storm. It mirrored my situation. Losing Jillian felt like losing a limb. Tears streamed down my face as I turned back to Mark and Lena. Don't you dare make excuses, I hissed. You've known Jillian's been cheating for months and said nothing. But Gregory, it's true, Lena started. Love, I interrupted. Real love doesn't betray and humiliate. I thought what Jillian and I had was true love. I never doubted her. I worshipped her and would have given her everything. I know, Lena said, tears in her eyes. But Jillian and Troy... Stop, I shouted, my rage boiling over. My tears disappeared. Stop, I repeated quietly. I don't want to hear another word about Jillian and Troy. I just wasted the last 7 years of my life. Years of supporting Jillian through her struggles, encouraging her growth, enduring severe period pains, family planning, and talking about growing old together. I was only her plan B. Why does Troy get to come back and take everything I worked for? I asked. They looked at me as if I didn't understand. I continued, my pain and anguish bursting out. He gets all my efforts, the woman I helped rebuild, and all her friends who betrayed me. At least they looked ashamed. Well, screw it, I exclaimed. Get off my property. Mark tried to interject. Greg, I glared at him. I get it. You thought Jillian and I would be happy forever, but Troy is back and they deserve to be happy, right? What about me and my happiness? I asked. They had no answer. I deserve a faithful wife and friends who care, I said. I don't need your pity. If I seem bitter, it's because I am. Put yourself in my shoes. When Lena leaves you for her true love, you'll understand. Mark tightened his grip on Lena's arm, silencing her. All right, Gregory, he said. We're leaving. But is there anything we can do? I looked at their minivan. Wait here. I brought out several boxes of Jillian's things and threw them in front of them. Fragile items shattered. Take these to Jillian's new place, I said. But Jillian said she needs the house, Lena said. I laughed. It's not her house. Tell her not to come back. Everything that belongs to her is in these boxes. My lawyers will send the divorce papers on Monday. You didn't even... Lena started. Fight? I interjected. No, she's in love with him. She cheated on me, and she's been lying for years. She gets what she deserves. I watched them load the boxes into their van and drive away. They realized that they had lost my friendship, but I wasn't there to see their remorse that night. I got drunk and cried. I trashed the living room in my rage, breaking a vase from our first wedding anniversary and smashing furniture. I punched holes in the hallway walls, ripped off cabinet doors, and dented the refrigerator. I woke up with a hangover, a headache, bloody knuckles, possibly a broken hand, and scratches all over. I bandaged myself and knew I'd need to see a doctor. The living room was destroyed, the hallway walls were damaged, and the kitchen was a mess. I remembered the twisted satisfaction of hitting the refrigerator. In the dented refrigerator, I found expired orange juice. I took a couple of Panadol tablets and drank a big gulp. After half an hour, the throbbing subsided. I moved to the living room, sat on the floor between broken chairs, and stared at the cracked TV. The day passed in a blur. I went to the doctor, who found hairline fractures in both arms and bandaged them. I ignored messages from people, including Mark and Lena. That night, I went to bed without recalling much of the day except for the TV and doctor visit. Monday morning, I went to the office. I checked emails and prepared for a 9 a.m. team meeting. My receptionist, Colleen, entered, saw my bandages, and sat down. Bad weekend? She asked. I sighed and turned to her. Jillian dumped me for her true love, I said flatly. What? Colleen exclaimed. No, you're serious. I raised my bandaged hands, eyes watering. It's true. At the reunion, everyone knew Jillian had been cheating with Troy. They ambushed me Friday night. I broke down, and Colleen hugged me. I told her how I had smashed the furniture in a drunken rage and how I had visited the doctor. By morning, we dried our eyes and prepared for the meeting. Colleen led the team into the meeting room. Hope everyone had a good weekend, I said, noting their glances at my bandages. This week, I began, but Colleen interrupted. I'm sorry, Gregory, but you can't pretend everything is normal after what happened. I hesitated, then nodded. Colleen explained, Gregory was betrayed by his wife and friends. Jillian had been cheating and left him in a humiliating way. She paused, looking at James. Isn't that right, James? James, one of Jillian's classmates, turned pale. He said, were you there Friday night? Colleen asked. Yes, but, James began. And did you know about the affair? Colleen pressed. James lowered his gaze. I knew, he admitted quietly. The room fell silent, bristling with anger toward James. James, Colleen said, you need to leave and think about your future here. If we find you supported Jillian, you'll be dismissed. Understand? He swallowed and stood. I understand, he said, leaving the room quietly. No one spoke for the most part. I'd forgotten that James had been in the room on Friday. I hardly noticed anyone except those ruining my life. I cleared my throat. Everyone, I said, bringing us back to the present. My personal life is a mess, and my weekend wasn't pleasant. I held up my bandaged hands. But we have work to do and clients to serve. Let's support each other, and if you need anything, let Colleen know. I'll be here, but bear with me. I nearly cried as everyone expressed sympathy and encouragement. One last thing, I said. Don't crucify James just yet. Let's get the whole story before blaming him. Everyone muttered but agreed. Colleen ran the rest of the meeting. Afterward, I went back to my office and stared out the window. A few minutes later, Colleen knocked and entered with James. You and James need to talk, Colleen said. I nodded, settling into my chair. James sat across from me, looking down. So, an accusation in my voice? Gregory, James started, then laughed briefly. Something funny? Asked Colleen, her tone stern. James smiled sadly. No, nothing's funny. My boss was betrayed, my wife yelled at me all day, and I might lose my job. It's gallows humor or tears. I smiled cautiously. James, start at the beginning, he nodded. You've heard how perfect Jillian and Troy were in high school? I nodded yes. Recently, that's all I've heard, James continued. I was a math major, not in the popular crowd, but we all knew Jillian and Troy. They broke up before graduation when Troy went abroad. Jillian was devastated. Then I found out Troy had a girlfriend in the States. I nodded again. I had heard Jillian's side when I helped her get back on her feet. We kissed for the first time after one of those conversations, said James. That's how it was until recently. James continued. I got my degree, married Sherry, and got a job here. I was surprised and happy to see Jillian with you, knowing Troy's departure had hurt her. James paused, and I asked, when did you find out about their affair? About an hour before you and Jillian showed up for dinner, he said. A few classmates mentioned Jillian leaving you for Troy, and everyone was surprised. I gave James a questioning look. He sighed before saying, before dinner, only a few people knew what was happening, but by then everyone in the class knew Jillian and Troy were meant to be together. Mark and Lena took Sherry and me aside and explained. They felt sorry for you, but said you weren't part of Jillian's future anymore. James looked pained. He was blushing and maybe even teary-eyed. Sorry, Gregory, we couldn't stay for dinner. Sherry wanted to be there for you, but started feeling guilty, but he raised his hand to stop me. I'm sorry, Gregory. I need to finish this. I promised Sherry. I nodded. I was stunned. He continued. We were banished from the reunion because your wife was going to betray you. Sherry and I didn't know what to do, so we went to the club. We wanted to be there for you. What happened? I asked. I didn't see you there. We were there when you arrived, but a few guys kept us from getting to you until Jillian told you. When you left, we ran after you, but you were gone. We stood outside the club for half an hour, unsure what to do. Eventually, we went back inside. James paused, then continued. When we returned, half the class shunned us, and the other half were disgusted. They surrounded us and wouldn't let anyone near us for the rest of the evening. And, I prompted, they acted like you were nothing, James said, swallowing. This had been planned for months. There was talk that Jillian and Troy were planning to get married soon. He looked down, clenching his hands. Sherry and I fought all night. We were repulsed by their behavior. James pulled a piece of paper from his notebook and placed it in front of me. What's this? I asked. Reading it quickly, my resignation, he said, defeated. It was signed and dated yesterday. James, I began. No, Gregory, he replied. What they did was wrong, and I couldn't help you. You deserve better. Sherry and I agreed that I'd rather resign than have you see me and be reminded of Friday night. We sat in silence. I looked at his resignation letter and laughed. A short, bark-like laugh. Colleen and James looked at me. I tore the letter in two. Your resignation is rejected, I said. Behind us, Colleen smiled. James looked shocked. But Gregory, why? He stammered. My friends call me Greg. You tried to help me and sympathize with me. If that's not a friend, I don't know what is. James nodded. Sherry and I thought it was for the best. I know, I replied, and that's why I want you both to stay. We talked for half an hour, then Colleen, James, and I called everyone back into the conference room. I explained that James had been blindsided too and was ejected because of the situation. Any animosity toward James disappeared, and everyone left with smiles. The rest of the week, I spent most of my time in the office, counseling my staff and working on my divorce. I didn't end up mailing the divorce papers. Jillian filed them at work. Infidelity isn't a mandatory factor in divorce in Australia, but I made sure my lawyers, Mike and his assistant, Sally, included it in the legal documents. After Jillian received the papers, I ignored her calls and texts, assuming they were angry. I managed bank accounts, listed assets, checked canceled cards, and insurance. My team handled the legal paperwork, ensuring Jillian couldn't touch anything. Colleen stopped by my house on Tuesday night and was shocked by the devastation. She cried as she walked through the rooms. By Wednesday, she had contacted my insurance agency and arranged a damage assessment. By Friday, appraisers and cleanup crews were scheduled for the following week. Exhausted by Friday night, I still didn't sleep well. On Saturday morning, I went for a run, ending up at a cafe where I enjoyed coffee and a croissant before jogging home. To my surprise, Jillian was sitting on the steps when I arrived. She looked disheveled, dressed in mismatched clothes. "Greg, it's good to see you," Jillian began. I spat out a ball of phlegm, interrupting her. "What? Are you surprised I'm taking care of myself after you betrayed me? Afraid I'd eliminate myself or be a wreck?" She took a step back, pale. "It wasn't like that, Greg. I never meant to hurt you." "Yeah, right," I said. "You set everything up to humiliate me in front of everyone." She looked down. "It wasn't my idea. Mark and Troy thought if we did it this way, you wouldn't resist." I laughed bitterly. "You think I'd fight for you after you betrayed me? You're delusional." "But Greg, you can't talk to me like that," Jillian said, her anger rising. "I'm still your wife." "Huh?" I said, walking to the front door and unlocking it. When she tried to follow, I stopped her. "You're not invited." "But Greg, this is still my house too," she insisted. "No, it isn't. It belongs to a trust, and I pay rent to it." She looked confused. "Jillian, this isn't your house anymore. You don't live here." "Wait, I have something for you." I went inside, texted my lawyer, grabbed a few things, and returned to the door. Jillian was still there. "Greg, First," I said, raising my hand, "it's Gregory. Only friends call me Greg, and you're not a friend." She gulped. "Second," I handed her a folder. "Here's a check for half of our assets." Her eyes widened. "Third, you have something for me." She hesitated, then pulled a manila envelope from her purse. "I'm sorry, Gregory." "You will be," I said. I opened the envelope and read the documents. She wanted 75% of our savings, 50% of my business, along with a restraining order. "Really?" I asked, raising my eyebrows. She couldn't meet my gaze. She knew they had gone too far. I called my divorce attorney while Jillian stood there looking defeated. Sally, to be one of the most disgusting humans. Jillian was silent for a moment. "It's not like that, Greg," she said quietly. "I convinced Troy to give you until Monday to move out so we can move in." I laughed. "You can't move in. It's not your house." "But you can't be here," she replied irritably. I shrugged. "Maybe, but that doesn't mean you can be here either." "It's time for you to leave, Jillian. I'd wish you well, but that would be a lie." "Do you hate me that much?" she asked, looking at my bandaged hands. "Do you seriously have the nerve to ask me that after everything?" I answered. "You were my best friend and you destroyed it all." Jillian looked down. "It wasn't my idea. Mark and Troy thought it would be easier this way." I laughed bitterly. "You think I'd fight for you after you betrayed me?" "But no buts. You lost any right to my respect when you cheated. Now get lost." "Greg, you can't talk to me like that. I'm still your wife," Jillian said, her anger rising. "Huh?" I said, unlocking the door. When she tried to follow, I stopped her. "You're not invited." "But, Greg, this is still my house too," she insisted. "No, it isn't. The house belongs to a trust. You don't live here anymore." "Wait, I have something for you." I went inside, texted my lawyer, grabbed a few things, and returned. Jillian was still there. "Greg, First," I said, raising my hand, "it's Gregory. Only friends call me Greg, and you're not a friend." She gulped. "Second," I handed her a folder. "Here's a check for your half of our assets." Her eyes widened. "Third, you have something for me." She hesitated, then pulled a manila envelope from her purse. "I'm sorry, Gregory." "You will be," I said. I opened the envelope and read the documents. She wanted 75% of our savings and 50% of my business, along with a restraining order. "Really?" I asked, raising my eyebrows. She couldn't meet my gaze. She knew they had gone too far. At that moment, I saw Mark and Lena approaching with Troy in the distance. "Oh, look, our friends," I hissed. "Greg," Mark said, coming up behind Jillian. "Calm down, buddy." "Back off, a-hole," I replied. "We're not friends. Your betrayal is as bad as hers. You have nothing to say that will help." I glared at Mark and Lena. "You both helped set up that scene at the club to humiliate me. You're as guilty as Jillian and Troy." "Greg," Lena began. Don't you dare, Lena. You helped my wife cheat on me and set me up for maximum humiliation. If you think that's love, then there's no hope for society." They looked stunned. I stopped, then had an idea. "Lena, will you forgive Mark when he comes home smelling of perfume after spending the night at a strip club?" I smiled condescendingly. Lena looked at Mark. "Baby, that's not true," Mark stammered. I laughed. "No, it's not true, but Mark likes to brag about special lap dances during our golf games." Lena sensed the truth. Mark took a step back and ran down the road with Lena chasing him, yelling. I looked at Troy, who was staring in surprise, then at Jillian with a smug grin. "Greg," she said hesitantly. "I mean Gregory, you didn't have to do that." I grinned. "Don't worry, Jillian. This is just the first shot. Mark still has a lot of secrets, and this is just the beginning. You and Troy won't like what's coming next." "What do you mean?" Jillian asked. "Go away, Jillian. Tell Troy to take you far away, because if you stay, things will get worse for you." "Greg, what's wrong with you? Where is the man I love?" she asked. "He's dead. You ripped my heart and soul out, and what's left is something dark." I stepped back and slammed the door, letting out a villainous chuckle. 10 minutes later, I looked outside and saw that Jill, Troy, and the truck were gone. I sat on the floor, shaking from the confrontation, and broke down again. I loved her, but I hated her, wanting her to feel regret. I knew she wouldn't come back, and even if she did, I couldn't accept her again. The next month was filled with lawyers, financial disclosures, and dividing assets. My staff rallied around me. Colleen helped me find a counselor, and I moved into an apartment. Colleen organized cleaning and repairs for the house. Despite wanting a clean break, Jillian fought over many things. First, she claimed $155,000 of our $200,000 in bank accounts. She also tried to claim our house and investment properties, but they were owned by a trust and unavailable to her. She fought with lawyers likely paid by Troy, but failed. I smiled, knowing she lost any return on that investment. Next, she wanted furniture and jewelry. I had her belongings packed and delivered to her, including shoes, earrings, and necklaces. She also claimed half of my business, but the prenuptial agreement laid out by Sally denied her any part of it. Jillian ended up with $10,000, likely spent on lawyers, while I kept my houses in business. Sally also got Jillian to give up her wedding and engagement rings. The restraining order was lifted since Jillian had no rights to the house. The locks had been changed, and a security company checked the house until I moved back in. We waited a couple of months for the divorce to finalize. James and Sherry asked everyone to back off, and Jillian and Troy moved into an apartment provided by his company. Troy expected a house, but he got nothing. In August, 2 weeks before the final divorce during tax season, I was busy with work. One day, I was surprised to see an entrepreneur friend waiting for me. I never thought I would see their face again. "Gregory, come on, you have to help me," pleaded Mark, sitting at a table in our meeting room. Lena sat next to him, eyes downcast. Their relationship seemed strained, likely due to our last encounter. "Why?" I asked, enjoying their discomfort. James sat next to me. We had done taxes for Mark's import-export business for years. It was a tough job ensuring everything was correct, but we were paid well. Mark could have gone to another firm, but it would have cost him more and taken years for them to understand his business. "Are you really going to make me beg?" said Mark, his voice pleading. I laughed. James smiled. "Begging would be nice, but futile, why are you here? You planned to humiliate me, made excuses, and didn't care about my feelings. Now you want my help?" No one spoke. "You know, you were right," Lena said quietly. I raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Lena looked at Mark, then back at me, anger passing over her face before turning to sadness. Mark lowered his gaze. "You were right," she said sadly, "not just about Mark's behavior, but everything. We were so caught up in Troy and Jillian's romance that we didn't think about you." I was about to reply, but Lena continued. "I saw the truth in Mark's eyes when you confronted us. We knew it was wrong, but lied to ourselves about true love. Some, like my husband, used it to cover their own cheating." I looked at the broken couple. Mark couldn't meet our eyes, and Lena was near a breakdown. "So what now?" I asked. "Now we face the consequences," Lena said bitterly. "We've hurt those we loved, and my marriage is on the brink. I don't know if it will survive." I looked at Mark, who remained silent. "I can't say I'm not pleased you're both suffering," I said softly, But as managing partner, I've decided it's not in our best interest to continue handling your company. Mark's shoulders slumped. However, I continued. Mark looked up with hope. I can recommend 3 firms to take on your account. James has their credentials. James handed over a sheet of paper. If you're interested, let James know, and we'll send your financial statements to them. That's it? Asked Mark. A recommendation? Are you really done with us? Yes, I replied, shrugging. You ruined my marriage by supporting Jillian and Troy, using terms like true love. You laughed and joked about it. This is the consequence. With that, I left the room without saying goodbye. Later, James informed me they had chosen a firm and would complete the transfer once Mark and Lena signed the forms over. Over the next month, 3 more clients, all Jillian's classmates who supported her infidelity, realized I wouldn't do business with them anymore. Despite losing 4 clients, I gained 6 others who didn't support what happened and wanted to help. By September, the divorce was final. I had moved back into the renovated house and my hands had healed. The day I received the divorce paperwork, Jillian called and texted me saying goodbye. Gregory, I'm sorry. I wasn't sure how to feel. The betrayal still hurt, but I knew if Jillian could leave me so easily, she wasn't the one for me. That weekend, Colleen and my team surprised me with a family barbecue at my place. Over 24 people came, including Colleen, James, and Sherry, ensuring I was never alone. At one point, while James manned the barbecue, Sherry sat with me watching the kids play in my yard. It hurts, knowing Jillian and I would never have the children we talked about, Sherry said. She kissed my cheek and added, Life will happen again, Greg. You'll have the support of friends, coworkers, and family. We're here for you. Sherry hugged me as I cried. James, Colleen, and others offered support throughout the day, and despite being a wreck, I felt comforted. The following week at work, I felt much better. The staff noticed my improved mood, and I even joked with them at the weekly meeting. I thanked everyone, especially James, Colleen, and Sherry, for their support. We gained 3 new clients, including 2 large corporations needing in-depth financial analysis. I decided to handle a forensic audit, diving back into work in the evenings. I established a routine of cooking dinner and working out, determined to rise above the betrayal. 2 weeks after the barbecue on a Thursday night, I was cooking dinner when the doorbell rang. I opened the door to a nervous but beautiful blonde woman. Before I could speak, she kissed me, pulling me down by my shirt. Her kiss was soft and minty, and I kissed her back, holding her close. After an indeterminate time, we parted, and I saw tears in her eyes. Before I could greet her, she slapped me. Not hard, more of a gesture. I stood in shock. I'm sorry, Gregory. That wasn't the best way to say hello, she said, her voice sultry yet firm. I tilted my head, wondering who she was. Sure, I said, leaving the question unanswered. The woman smiled. Rebecca. Rebecca, I repeated. We stood in silence for a moment. So, Rebecca, what brings you here tonight? You, she said simply. I guessed that from your greeting, but why did you come to see me? I asked with a slight smile. Because you need me here, she replied, smiling back. True, so tell me why I need you. I enjoy kissing a beautiful woman, but the slap confused me. She looked amused. Do you think I'm beautiful? I nodded. And gorgeous. Her smile widened, and I was captivated by this woman I had just met. Thank you, Gregory, she said, blushing. Does something smell nice? She asked, sniffing the air. I sighed contentedly and opened the door, inviting her in. We chatted as I led her to the kitchen, poured her a glass of a... While Shers continued preparing dinner, I quickly set another plate for Rebecca, who watched me cook and held her wine without drinking. I set the table, dimmed the lights, and served the food. Rebecca giggled. Our first date and you ordered for me. A woman loves a man who knows what he wants, she said. I replied. Rebecca laughed, then raised her glass to Gregory, showing that even wounded, he still knows how to treat a lady. We clinked glasses and smiled. Rebecca took a bite and her eyes widened. Gregory, this is amazing. Thank you. I nodded, tasting the food myself. It was delicious. Rebecca, no more games. Who are you, and what's happening? She took another bite and sipped her wine before speaking. First, thank you, Gregory. You handled my greeting with grace. I stood at your door for nearly 20 minutes before knocking. I nodded, sipping my wine. As for who I am, we've met before. I'm Colleen's niece. Ah, Rebecca. Yes, you look very different than the last time we met, I replied. She smiled, and I remembered her former goth look with dyed black hair, piercings, and heavy makeup. I was coming out of a phase of self-destruction, she said, smiling. I had just broken up with my boyfriend and was lost. Aunt Colleen brought me to your office after talking to my mom for a change of scenery. I nodded, recalling the meeting. She had come to the office dressed in all black with piercings. He cheated on me with 3 people, 2 girls and a guy, she said bluntly. I nearly choked on my wine. What? Yes, she said, looking into her wine glass. We were at a club and went back to a guy's place and I found them together. I ran home and cried for days. Mom convinced me to go for a walk with Aunt Colleen, and that's when she brought me to your office. I smiled. I remember. Aunt Colleen introduced us and you shook my hand. You didn't look at me like I was pathetic. You didn't judge me for how I was dressed or my piercings. Do you remember what you asked me? I nodded. I asked you what kind of coffee you wanted. Rebecca smiled. Yes, mocha with a double shot of chocolate, we said simultaneously, laughing. You remember? She asked. I nodded, taking another sip of wine. Her smile faded. The slap was because I was at the barbecue that day, and you didn't notice me, she said, looking into my eyes. I'm sorry, Rebecca. It was a rough day, I said. She smiled faintly. It's okay, Gregory. It wasn't meant to be serious. I just mentally kissed you and then slapped you because you didn't notice me. I even hugged you and told you everything would be okay, but I guess you don't remember much of that day. I had a vague image of slender arms and dark blue jeans with a red blouse telling me everything would be okay. Do you remember? She asked. Sort of. Red top, blue jeans? Rebecca nodded. I asked Aunt Colleen about you the other day, she said, blushing slightly. She knew I had a crush on you and encouraged me to come over and talk to you. I chuckled. Did you plan to kiss me? No, Rebecca blushed. I didn't know if I could do it, but when you opened the door, I just went for it. I smiled and took her hand. I'm glad you did. It was the best thing that's happened to me in months. Rebecca smiled, and we spent 3 hours talking. She helped me clean up dinner, and we continued our conversation over port in the living room. I learned that she was 28, 4 years younger than me, and a recent finance graduate. She liked various music but hated heavy metal. After her goth phase, she became a junior accountant at a manufacturing firm and enjoyed her work. She was close to her family, with parents married for 30 years and a younger sister in New Zealand. She loved the beach but had sensitive skin and had only had 2 boyfriends, including the goth who had betrayed her. We talked about our lives. I shared that I was estranged from my mother after my father's sudden passing caused family strife. My younger sister also caused a rift by taking Jillian's comment out of context. By 1:00 a.m., Rebecca decided to leave, though we were both tempted to continue. As I climbed into bed, I smiled for the first time since my life had fallen apart. Rebecca's bold actions bypassed months of trying to overcome my defenses and showed me that someone could care about me romantically. The next morning, my smile was undeniable, and everyone noticed. By lunchtime, Colleen cornered me. Okay, spill it, Greg. Who is she? She asked hopefully. Rebecca came over last night, I told her. Colleen's joyous shriek echoed through the office. She made me recount everything, laughing at the kiss and the slap. Greg, I'm so happy for you. Even if nothing comes of this, seeing you come out from under what Jillian and that a-hole did is worth it. But I think there's something between you and Rebecca. We talked a bit more, and I told Colleen that Rebecca and I had been texting all day and were having dinner Friday night. She was thrilled, and her happiness spread to everyone else. Friday night came and I picked up Rebecca. I asked her to dress up for our first official date. She looked stunning when she opened the door. Wow, I'm batting 1,000 so far, she laughed. Every time we meet, you can't even say hello. Hello, beautiful, I said. Better. Rebecca, she said, smiling. We walked hand in hand to my car, and when I opened the door, she stopped. Is this your car? She asked. Yeah, I said. Rebecca's jaw dropped. Yes, I'm a Mustang enthusiast, but not just any Mustang. I have a 1967 GT Classic. Gray with black racing stripes, and an altered exhaust. I couldn't believe Jillian didn't seize it during the divorce. She knew it was my prized possession. For Rebecca, I opened the passenger door, and she beamed as she slid in. The V8 engine's roar elicited a giggle from her as we headed into town, chatting about our weeks and Colleen's high hopes for our union. We dined at an upscale Japanese restaurant, sampling various dishes and sake, which we agreed was an enjoyable choice for a date night, but not for regular consumption. After dinner, we ventured to the casino, placed a few bets, and departed with $600 more than we entered with. The casino housed a classy club, so we donned dressier attire and stepped inside. Throughout the evening, men approached Rebecca for dances, but she politely declined each time. At one point, a man approached me saying, "You're a fortunate guy. Your lady has eyes only for you." Despite my request for a dance, she declined. He was a sturdy, handsome man, possibly a trainer or football player. With a pat on my shoulder, a smile, and a few words, he walked away. Saturday morning, I awoke with a smile on my face, recalling the previous night with Rebecca. We spent the weekend in bed, only rising for showers and meals. When it was time for work, I drove Rebecca back to her apartment in her Friday night attire. By the time I reached the office, I had acquired 2 more photos of my girlfriend. Rebecca spent every night with me that week, except Wednesday, when she had to work late. "Greg, do you have a few minutes?" James inquired one Tuesday after a coffee break. He shut the door behind him. "Sure," I replied, raising an eyebrow. "So you and Rebecca are progressing well?" he noted. "Yes," I grinned. "It's only been a few months, but it feels like 6. James's demeanor turned serious. "Sherry and I have been together for almost 5 years, but it feels like 10 in a good way." I grinned and raised my hand. "I understand, James," he nodded. "Sherry and I are thrilled to see you smiling again. We were wondering if you and Rebecca would come for dinner at our place Saturday night. I'll check with Becky, but I believe we're free." Greg?" James continued nervously. "It's about Jillian. She's passed away." "What about her? Do you know about the Kensington audit we're doing?" he asked. I nodded. James was leading the audit of Kensington, a major multinational. "We've discovered some issues," he explained, presenting reports. Apparently, one of their middle managers has been embezzling money for years, using it for illicit activities like narcotics, and providing for a mistress and child abroad. The man skillfully concealed the thefts across various cost centers and projects, totaling just under $2 million. The implications shocked me. "So let me get this straight," I said to James. "For over 4 years, he's been using company funds to finance drugs. And for the past 3 years, he's been using it for child support for a woman and child overseas?" James nodded in agreement. "Precisely." "Wow," I exclaimed, trying not to break out into a smile. "So much for true love." James snorted in agreement. A month later, we provided Kensington with an initial report, but withheld specifics until we completed file tracking. They were concerned about internal corruption and agreed to await a thorough investigation. We requested another month, which they granted. 2 weeks later, I came home on Friday to a candlelit dinner prepared by Rebecca. She poured me a Kraken and soda, and we dined on chicken boss kawa. I noticed a box between us, but refrained from commenting. After dinner, we settled in the living room with refilled drinks, dimmed lights, and soft music. "Greg, the past 6 months have been the best of my life," Rebecca said. "I know you were hurting when we met, but so was I. Our relationship has been exceptional because we give ourselves entirely to each other. I love you, Gregory, and I need you to know that before you open that box." Rebecca presented me with the box. It was a small headphone-shaped box with an envelope on top. I opened the envelope and read the letter inside. "Gregory, inside this box is the engagement ring you purchased last week. I discovered it while cleaning when you were in the shower. I ask that you open the box, retrieve the ring, and propose to me. I love you deeply, sincerely, and eternally. Rebecca, P.S. I love you, love you, love you." With hope in her eyes, I gazed at Rebecca. "I love you too," I said as I opened the box to reveal the ring I had purchased. It was a simple gold band with a single diamond. Rebecca beamed. I never looked inside. I was tempted, but I resisted. I got down on one knee. "Rebecca Brown, you brought me back to life. Before you kissed me, I thought I'd never find happiness again. You demonstrated how much you desired me, and I can't imagine a more ideal partner. I intended to propose at your family barbecue, but I couldn't wait any longer. Rebecca Beth Brown, will you marry me?" Rebecca jumped to her feet, exclaiming, "Yes!" She extended her hand, and I placed the ring on her finger. We shared a kiss. "Thank you, my fiancé," I whispered. "You're going to have the most caring and devoted wife in the world. And just wait until we have children." A minute later, the doorbell rang. I groaned but answered it to find Colleen, Rebecca's parents, James and Sherry. "Congratulations!" they all exclaimed. Rebecca wrapped her arms around me. "Sorry, babe, I wanted to celebrate our engagement, so I invited a few people over." "This is the last surprise, I promise," she said. We welcomed everyone inside, and her parents brought 2 bottles of champagne. As they distributed glasses, I feigned offense but couldn't help but smile while Rebecca proudly displayed her ring to the ladies. I received congratulatory backpats from my future father-in-law and James. We spent the evening sharing laughter and stories about Rebecca's childhood. Once everyone departed, Rebecca and I headed to bed, but not before taking a few more pictures. After that month, 3 important developments occurred within a 48-hour span. Firstly, we delivered Kensington the completed forensic report. They weren't thrilled, and some heads were sure to roll. Nevertheless, they consented to await the conclusion of a thorough investigation. Secondly, Rebecca dropped by my office with wedding ideas and legal paperwork. When I saw the prenup, I grew agitated. "Becca, this prenup gives you almost nothing," I protested. "It only leaves me with nothing if I cheat on you," she retorted calmly, "which I will never do. In all other scenarios, we split everything, and your business remains protected. Becca, I understand your desire to shield me, but the safeguards I have in place are sufficient." She grasped my hands. "This is my pledge to you. I'll only leave with nothing if I'm unfaithful. Trust me." I signed the document, placing my unwavering faith in her words. We discussed it thoroughly, and she ultimately proved correct. It was filed away in the cabinet. The third significant event transpired the following evening at home. Rebecca, who had now moved in permanently, instructed me to shower upon my return. Just as I stepped out of the shower, I heard screams. I hurriedly put on shorts and rushed out to discover my ex-wife, Jillian, yelling at Rebecca. "So I move out, and he moves in?" Jillian exclaimed. Rebecca chuckled. "You abandoned the most loving man on the planet and destroyed his heart." I agree. However, I am merely Gregory's personal concubine. He receives my body freely for his exclusive use. "Could you honestly say the same when you were married to him?" Jillian retorted. "You little trollop." A resounding slap echoed through the room. I rushed in to find Jillian with a crimson mark on her cheek. "Rebecca," I said with a grin, "meet Jillian, my ex-wife." "Jillian, this is Rebecca, my fiancée." They glared at each other as I stepped between them. "Do you find this amusing, Greg?" Jillian inquired. "Honestly, yeah. Since you weren't invited and started yelling before getting smacked, I find it rather humorous. Perhaps it's a bit of karma for the way our marriage ended." Rebecca smiled, but I raised my hand. "That's enough. Becca, what do you want, Jillian?" I sighed. "Why did you have to destroy my life?" she asked. "What do you mean, Jillian? I haven't had anything to do with you for almost a year. You left me for true love? Consequences be damned." Rebecca snorted behind me. "You didn't have to ruin Troy," Jillian said mournfully. I chuckled. "You're going to have to be more specific, Jillian. Your forensic audit of Kensington led to Troy's arrest. You didn't have to do that." "What?" "I shouldn't report to the company that one of their employees swindled over $2 million from them, which they spent on narcotics and supporting a woman and child in the U.S.? I asked, rhetorically. "Narcotics?" Jillian said, turning pale. "A woman and a child?" Clearly, whatever Jillian knew lacked substantial detail. I leaned forward. "Yes, Jillian. Your true love had a woman and child in the States and stole company funds to support them. It's all in the report. Want me to forward it to you?" She collapsed to the ground, her world shattering. For the first time, I saw that she was genuinely lost, and that everything she believed about her life was crumbling. Rebecca and I watched as she slumped on the porch. "Troy was arrested, you know," Jillian said, her anger replaced by hollow grief. "I didn't know Troy had been arrested, but I suspected authorities were closing in on him. We've been married less than 3 months, and he spent a month of that in the States," Jillian sobbed. I felt a pang of sympathy. I had been married to her for years, sharing many intimate moments, but she had also been my tormentor, discarding me cruelly and heartlessly. "What should I do, Jillian?" she asked, looking at Rebecca. You have the audacity to ask him that after what you did? Rebecca retorted firmly, yet without venom. He was mine long before he was yours, Jillian replied. Rebecca laughed, hugging me tightly. He was never truly yours, Jillian. You never let him into your heart completely. You must have withheld a part of yourself to do what you did. That's not true, Jillian protested, looking at me. Rebecca laughed. If you gave yourself entirely, why did you cheat on him as soon as your true love returned? Why did you humiliate him and attempt to take his house, investments, and business? Is that giving yourself completely? Jillian remained silent, appearing transparent and defeated. Rebecca, showing surprising compassion, sat down next to her. Jillian, Rebecca began softly, you don't know my story. When I first met Greg, he was happily married to you. From our brief conversation, I realized how deeply he loved you. Over time, I learned more and grew envious of you. Jillian appeared taken aback. When I heard about what you did to him, I was enraged, Rebecca continued. But then, at Greg's barbecue, when your divorce was finalized, I witnessed how shattered he was. Even Aunt Colleen struggled to reach him. He was on the brink of falling into depression, and my heart went out to him. Both women looked at me, Rebecca with adoration, Jillian with sorrow. Throughout the evening, everyone tried to comfort him. He wept openly, revealing his pain. I embraced him, though he doesn't recall it, and he expressed his gratitude. I understood that I could prevent him from spiraling into bitterness and perhaps help him find love with me. We remained silent for a moment. The following week, I came here, kissed him when he answered the door, and then I slapped him, Rebecca said with a smirk. Jillian's eyes widened. From that moment on, I have belonged to him entirely, Rebecca continued. There will never be another man in my heart. The thought of what you did disgusts me. You discarded a man who would have given you the world. For that, I thank you. My heart and soul belong to him now. If you hadn't discarded him, I never would have had a chance. No one spoke. We were all lost in our thoughts. What am I supposed to do now? Jillian asked. I gave up everything for a dream. Rebecca shrugged. Honestly, I don't care what you do. Jillian looked taken aback. You've let things spiral out of control, and I won't let you back into Greg's life. He's mine, and you don't want to see how crazy I'll get if you try to interfere. Rebecca walked over to me. I found my voice. Rebecca is right. She belongs to me, and I to her. We'll marry, have kids, and love each other until we die. I don't love you anymore, Jillian. I remember loving you, but after your betrayal and Rebecca's love, there's nothing left for you. Jillian looked utterly broken. To be honest, I don't like you. You've hurt me more than anyone ever has, but I'll give you some advice. Divorce Troy. Leave him before everything falls apart. He'll go to jail for a long time. Where will I go? She asked. I shrugged. I don't care. Maybe Mark and Lena will take you in. They're getting a divorce, Jillian said sadly. Not surprising. A cheating spouse will do that. You need to figure this out yourself. I'm not your friend. We're just people who once had something. Is there no chance of being friends? Jillian asked hopefully. No, Rebecca and I replied in unison. Jillian stood up, shaking her head sadly. Thank you for your honesty. I wish we could still be friends, but I see now it was all a dream. Take care of each other. She walked to her car, gave us a mournful look, and drove away. Over the next month, details of Troy's arrest emerged in the press. Our audit that uncovered the fraud made headlines, and by the end of the year, we had nearly doubled our staff due to high demand. Rebecca and I married in a small ceremony with friends and family. We honeymooned in North Queensland, enjoying 2 weeks on the Golden Beaches. When we returned, we settled into a routine of work, love, and planning our future. Rebecca agreed to stop birth control, and we waited to see what would happen. 9 months later, Sarah was born. 2 years later, we had twins, Henry and Peter. Our last child, Bridget, was born after that. After Bridget, we decided that 4 kids were enough, and I had surgery. Our lives were rich and full, with the usual family problems, but our home was filled with love. 32 years later, on a crisp winter morning, the kids and I laid Rebecca to rest. Her battle with cancer had lasted 2 years. Even in her weakened state, we often lay together, and she needed to feel my love. Baby, Rebecca said in pain but alert, We're going to be okay. I'm not leaving you alone. I snorted. I know. We'll only be apart for a few years before I find you, I said, stroking her graying blonde hair. Rebecca smiled. Like Canada. We both smiled, remembering the blizzard that kept me an hour away from her for 3 weeks, communicating only via FaceTime. Yeah, I replied, and we smiled. Will you miss me? She asked. I snorted again. You know I'll miss you with all my soul. We lay together, not needing words. After a while, she grabbed my hand. I'm scared, baby, Rebecca said, crying quietly. I know there's not much time left. I can feel my body shutting down. Her tears hit my chest. We've been married over 30 years, have 4 children, 6 grandchildren, and another on the way. We traveled the world together, and now this, I whispered. I'll be here the whole time. I'm not going anywhere. I know, Rebecca replied. It's the only thing that gives me strength. The next day, the children came with their families, and we all sat with Rebecca. She was much weaker than before, and we knew her time was near. As her skin lost color, we spent the day reminiscing, laughing, crying, and singing. The kids said their goodbyes surrounding the bed, and I hugged my wife. I love you, I told her, feeling our time together slipping away. I love you, she replied weakly. Her eyes dimmed, and her hand lightly slapped my cheek, reminding me of our first day together. We smiled, and she pulled me close for a kiss. In that moment, all the years melted away. She looked young and vibrant again, without a trace of cancer. We snuggled, my tears soaking the sheets as she slipped away. I felt a part of myself was lost forever. My family surrounded me, and we cried openly. Rebecca, my true love and soulmate, was gone. I knew I'd never be the same without her, but I was also relieved that she was no longer in pain. Even though she was gone, I had daily reminders of our life together. Our children were often by my side, and friends like James and Cher were always around. As months passed, I found joy in my family and friends. If I felt lonely at night, I had countless pictures and videos of Rebecca to bring me comfort. 6 months after Rebecca's passing, I was enjoying coffee at our local cafe when a shadow fell over me. Gregory? Said a voice I hadn't heard in over 30 years. Jillian? I replied, recognizing her as an older version of the woman I once loved. I gestured to the seat across from me. Would you care to join me? She hesitated before nodding and sitting down. As I studied her, I noticed the wrinkles, gaunt look, and lean body. I hadn't followed her life since that evening on my porch, but it hadn't been easy. How are you doing? I asked. Oh, you know. As I get older, my body doesn't react the way it used to. Sometimes I wonder if I should just stay in bed to avoid the pain, she said. I laughed, understanding her sentiment. Jillian smiled, but then grew sadder. I heard about Rebecca. I'm sorry, Greg, she said genuinely. Thank you, I replied. I miss her terribly, but she's always in my heart. The kids don't give me a moment's peace now that Becky's gone. They're determined to keep me active and looked after. Jillian smiled briefly, but then looked sad again. Do you have kids? I asked. She shook her head, looking down at her coffee with regret. I've never had children, Jillian said. I was married 6 times, but never found anything like what I had with my first boyfriend. I really blew it, didn't I, Greg? She asked. Then she held up her hand. No, I know I did. I hurt you badly and blamed you for Troy tricking me into thinking we were soulmates. Every man since then wasn't a match for you. I reflected on the woman before me. I had hated her for a long time, but now I saw a broken, sad woman who had never found real love. Jill, I said, catching my breath. She looked at me with hope. You need to forgive yourself. Not all 6 marriages could have been as bad as Troy's. Surely a couple of them were okay. Her eyes lost focus for a moment. You're right. Barry, my 4th husband, was kind and gentle. But after that night with you and Rebecca, I never forgave myself for what I did to you. I wanted to be loved but never got over the pain I caused you, she said, looking at me. I know I've said this before, but I'm sorry for what I did to you, Greg. Jill, I said softly, thank you. Jillian, I accept your apology. And we both smiled. We spent the next few hours talking. I shared stories about my life with Rebecca and our kids. Jillian talked about her hobbies and her retirement after 25 years in local government administration. Greg, do you think that... She began uncertainly as we stood to leave. I smiled and shook my head. No, I'm sorry, Jillian. I love my wife too much. I know you loved Rebecca, but she's gone, she said, searching for the right words. I held up my hand. Jillian, Becca and I were only separated for a short time. Until we are reunited again, my love for her burns as brightly today as it did the day we met. I cannot and will not cheat on my wife. My words struck a deep chord in Jillian, and she nodded slowly. Friends, then? She asked. We'll see, Jillian. We'll see, I replied. I held on for another decade until a stroke took me on a Saturday afternoon. Sarah and Bridget were nearby, and we were having lunch when I sat down to watch TV. I felt no pain, just fatigue. And then I closed my eyes. The next moment, I felt arms around my waist and realized Rebecca was hugging me. Becca? I asked. It's okay, baby. It's your time, she told me. The kids? I asked. They're ready. You haven't noticed how much you've slowed down in the last month, but they have, she said. This is real, isn't it? I asked. She laughed, pulled me close, and kissed me. If it is, what a way to go, kissing your wife until your last breath. But no, it's real. Look, the girls are coming. Rebecca and I watched my family gather and cry, but there was laughter too. They shared stories about Rebecca and me, laughing and crying together. Rebecca and I stood with our arms around each other, proud of our strong family. When the paramedics took my body away, Rebecca and I hugged and kissed the kids, knowing it would be a long time before we saw them again. They didn't notice us, just a slight movement of air. Come on, baby, Rebecca said, wiping her tears. I have so much to show you. We have a lot of love to make up for. Don't I have to go to God or something? I asked. Well, yeah, he's waiting for you. But don't worry, he's a good guy. She smiled. I paused to take her in. She looked as she did before we conceived Sarah, and I looked about the same too. Wait, there's entertainment in heaven? I asked. Rebecca smiled, her eyes blazing. She grabbed my hand and pulled me along. Come and find out, my true love, she said with sensuality in her voice. Come and find out.